asking is a part of being in the kingdom. It's prayer. And then there's, formal prayer, but he's going beyond that to all kinds of ways that you need to make verbal what's needed in a situation and ask. And the surprising thing is if you ask, then you're also become part of the answer, usually. And it's the story about the librarian the woman who moved into a small town and they had no library in the school. She asked and got books. So I liked it. That's it. I said more than one sentence.
So Sharon, we were also in Martine's Ask group. So
But he wasn't there.
but that's okay. We had a
You were in an Ask group too?
We were also in an Ask group, in Martine's Ask group. So
Who was
our
in your
group, if you do not, Luigi, Jill and Luigi and I were in our Martine Ask group. And we had a lot of pieces, but one key for me was not about obligation, but about choice.
Mm-hmm.
This is the reason we're surfacing Ask.
Martine was in the group on availability, and I appreciate him and Marshall being there. And we talked about how you release funds responsibly. And he had a church group running out of money because things were being cut. He joined the board and is going to call the question, but just joining the board to help raise the question of where they were going to find money already is a responsive response, even if the money doesn't all get raised. And I gave an illustration of, it's really an ask that came to us, about from an immigrant lawn care guy who wanted to park in our front yard. And we connected him up with a church parking lot, and we're in the middle of getting that all worked out. So, and Marshall said that we needed to not work in the fortress mentality, which is what was going on in the feeding of the 5,000 when, Mama said, hey, this food is for us, so don't say anything about it to anybody else. And Jesus opened that up. So we want to ask the questions that open it up. You're muted.
All right. Any new groups you'd like to form? We've got Ruth on availability. Where have you been, Andrew? Talking to the mayor of a small town. The unaddressed problem of people living alone and asking.
I'm interested in going to the mayor of the small town and seeing what's going on.
Okay, so I'm going to open the rooms again, and you get to pick where you're going, and we'll see you in 20 minutes.
Now, just so everybody knows, if you look at your breakout space, you can see which groups are open, which people are in each group, and you can move as many times as you want.
Yep. So basically, we talked about some of these things that we're now currently doing, perhaps because we were asked and we decided to participate. And yeah, so I certainly believe that we don't have because we don't ask. And I think asking is trusting. I mean, I think an ask is as much, to me, trusting in God and the universe, as it were, and finding ways of entering into abundance around the things that we feel need to be done for ourselves, for others, for our communities, etc. And I was sharing just that I was asked by a colleague to provide him with some support around changing the context of his ministry to see if there was a way of continuing that ministry, even though right now it is not being funded, or not funded at the same level that it was previously. And, you know, but that would require, I was reflecting on the fact that it requires a major change in the way this person operates and their staff, and major change in the way the board operates. And I'm not sure whether they're up to that or whether they're willing to do that. So I personally know what they need to do, but me knowing something doesn't mean that they are going to be interested in doing those things.
Right.
And so we're in this process of how do I be a part of what they are now in the middle of, and how do I help them make a decision about how they want to move forward. So which has opened up all of these other areas. It's a part of it's definitely been asking, it's definitely availability, and it's definitely a generative process, because the idea is, can they transform their own situation? So what are some other things that people have been called into?
I was just struck this morning, we
Go ahead,
had
Jim.
a woman show up at the food bank with her son, who is a senior in high school and needs to do community service. It was a busy morning. We had a lot to do and not many volunteers. And it was an additional, there must have been 24 times in the morning when it dawned on me to stop and ask, could you do this? Could you help with that? Could you? And he was grateful. And because then there was also several times when I said, could you take this out to the garbage? And on the way out to the garbage, somebody else said, could you lift this and put it into the freezer? And somebody else said, so there were multiple asks at times, but that dimension of things seemed important. I'm complete.
Found in myself that I'm much better at being the askee than the asker.
What does that mean?
It
The
means
ASCII.
the ASCII. In other words, I like having, when people make a request of me, and I have no struggle with seeing my response and wanting to be, wanting to help and all. So I have no struggle with that side of the ask, but the other side, being the asker, I always struggle with, because we talked about this a little bit in the earlier space. The whole question.
So you're saying, Larry, that you don't want to give anyone the opportunity that you have truly enjoyed?
Yes.
That's one interpretation.
And that's, yes. And this is exactly right, Martine. I want to deny them that opportunity. My story is that it's around the obligation piece, that I don't like to feel like I'm giving obligation to others. And I understand intellectually, this is not, that the fact is I'm not giving them obligation, I'm giving them opportunity. So it's not that I don't understand that intellectually, but I also understand internally that I feel this sense of risk, or whatever the right word is. So this is where I struggle with this.
One of the things to think about there, I mean, we very seldom are in asking position with people that we don't really know well, or that we don't share some values with. And so when we are in an ask position within that situation, most of the time we're asking people to be clear about their own values and to live into them. And that is a wonderful thing to do. Yeah, so if we can, if we can kind of, I know you understand that, but if that can be the context of your asking, it makes a lot more, it puts you
And then
in a
I
different,
lost-
it puts you in a different frame of mind. Because it's not really, it's none of the bad words. It's not manipulating, it's not coercing, it's not begging, it's not pleading, it's not any of those things. It is a very positive means whereby you're asking someone to live into their very best selves. And that can make it easier. I struggle with that also, but the thing about it is that, I mean, the more I ask, the more wonderful it becomes. And when you're asking somebody to live into their own values, when they say no, it's okay. You know that they're just, the moment's not right for them.
I should also say that if Evelyn was in this conversation right now, she would tell you, I ask all the time. So I just try not to make it, I try to make it implicit rather than explicit. And so there's that. And it's also, I'm operating, of course, in an Asian context where social context is a much stronger part of the story than it is in some other places. So I'm complete.
Hi, Sharon. How did you get in here?
I just left the other,
On my mind, so you can think about that.
I think that's a great idea.
Hi, James.
Hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
We decided that the 2 chapters that would be really good for we talked through how to talk through a couple of chapters and use them with this mayor, and particularly discernment and inventory. Start there. Because he's beginning, right? So I guess the generosity is to is to start there.
Our
Well,
generous
it's also-
nature took us over there.
When you say that, it's also occurring to me that doing the little bit of work of creating a list, the practice of generosity, asking, building mutual aid, and that just was a 1 sentence or so statement. that could be kind of a lead-in into that might be helpful.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good.
And I'm just still thinking about your mayor, because I've just been in another study group at church that's just terrible. So he might need to know about objective, reflective, interpretive, decisional questions
Yeah,
if
yeah.
he's leading a meeting or leading a group. That's a pretty fundamental tool.
Yes, and I think he would tend to go to the decisional, right away.
There's so much you'd like to convey to some people, but it's hard to keep your mouth shut sometimes.
So, Marshall, what about the question that you started out with? What would you say to this mayor about that question? Or is there,
Of the isolation?
the isolation?
The first thing to do is read the article in the New York Times about that and become familiar with these people in the corners of society who are sometimes very isolated and not engaged because they don't have family. And we are amazingly organized according to families. Thanksgiving being a great example of how we do it in families.
That's what my son says, just this. I mean, he actually has people to do Thanksgiving with, but it's a very small group of people, and he doesn't have siblings and he doesn't have cousins that he knows, or whatever. He sees himself as getting older and being just what you're describing.
So I can tell you how society is organizing to serve this group of people. First of all, you have to be very wealthy
Yeah, right.
to get in. And then you have to pay a starting amount of at least $3,500 a month just to stay in one of these communities, or more. Okay, 35 is the bare minimum. And then you get to be in essentially a grounded cruise ship. It doesn't go anywhere. But it functions like a cruise ship.
Yeah.
And that one.
All the food you can eat, all the booze you want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I could tell you some interesting personal stories about that, but that's leaving out poor people in rural America.
Yep.
I have a small group as a part of this last chapter cohort. And one of the participants, she's active in the top network, has a rental property with a mother-in-law house behind it. She's planning to move to the mother-in-law house, but then she's single. She's thinking about who to invite to move in with her so they can retire together. And I remember reading a couple of articles about that kind of voluntary shared housing, where people just find ways to move in together and have a bedroom and stuff. But I also have run into stories about communities that are passing legislation to make that illegal.
What?
Oh, why would they make it illegal?
Our homeowners association
Oh,
has
that's horrible.
something that says you can't put two people in two families in a home. You can have guests, but you can't, quote, officially rent out your room or, I mean, it's
That's
not
the,
helpful.
that's the fortress mentality, Ruth.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, it also was, there's a sentence somewhere early on about
They're not, finish
They're
the
not
sentence,
used-
Marty.
They're not used to asking for money.
Yeah.
Jim, finish the sentence. About,
Who's the they?
We're in. Oh, okay.
There's a sentence somewhere in here about how crisis or necessity oftentimes is a spur for generosity. I guess that's the whole point.
yeah,
If Jesus and the disciples, if Jesus had stopped talking early enough for people to go back home
Yeah.
for dinner, it
They
you
would-
know, would have all worked out. But so that reminded me of a chapter I read from Jane Jacobs about the rebuilding in New York City that happened when all these mansions got cut up into multi-housing units because life changed and there had to be a different way for people to live and live together more cheaply. And her belief that one of the main things that's going to happen in North America is this pattern of excessive personal space is life itself is going to call that into question and make something else happen.
Yes.
It is already, I think.
Any other one sentence shares from the groups? I can't read your lips, Ronnie. I don't know if you're singing.
oh, I'm just reading the chat.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the chat. Oh. Where's the chat? Oh, there's the chat.
Okay.
Look at you. Oh, God.
See it?
So, any new topics? Am I supposed to ask that, Larry, or are we just supposed to stop?
There's
Okay,
no
any new
spo-
topics?
There's no supposed to, but yes, you can ask
Larry?
that question.
Was your comment in the chat, you said not used to asking for money?
That was what Martine said in our group.
I just want to, I have a one sentence thing I'd like to say about the money thing.
Mm.
I can't think of another organization other than the one that we participated in that taught people how to ask any better than the one that we lived with.
That's right.
We learned to cold call. We learned to walk in and ask preposterous things.
Mhm, we did.
We talked to all of our relatives until they were sick of from hearing from us about the current new need that we needed. We're not afraid to ask, and people are so paralyzed by talking about money or asking for money or asking for what they need. I have a freedom that I see in myself that I do not see in other people. That is just extraordinary, and it is a taught. Sometimes taught and sometimes just thrown in the water, but it moved, it created a new person in me.
Mm.
I
So
think
let me ask
Martinez
this
has been
question.
there as well, and he didn't come with the organization that we're talking about, but he knows how to do it as well.
Given the world we're living in and its challenges and its complexity and its changing reality, I'm thinking back to last week's question about robust.
Mm.
What might be some robust practices of generosity that we need to work on that are gonna help, that are gonna position us for what's ahead?
Well, I mean, not in top, but I think one of the most creative places that it could move right now would be, how do you teach people to ask?
You teach people to ask.
It's my 2 cents.
One of the places I struggle is generosity is not just asking.
That's right.
It's the flow.
Well, it's
Being a part of the answer.
it's also my assumption. I remember whenever I walked by a beggar in India, I would always assume I'm giving enough. So I don't have to give to this, but I'm giving my life. Why do I need to give 10 paisa to this beggar? And so for me, this is one of the spaces of generosity. How do I recognize my own generosity, but also recognize that generosity is in the service. It's also in the opportunity to ask. It's in the, anyway, so that's where the comprehensiveness of generosity, that I tend to focus my generosity on this space. That I talked about this in our group, that I tend to focus my generosity on being the askee. You ask me anything, if I can do it, I'll do it. But I tend to avoid my generosity on being the asker.
Yeah.
So anyway, just recognizing that the comprehensiveness of generosity.
I just wanted to remind us all that we came up with 2 incredible models of generosity. One was called the religious house. Remember that?
Yeah.
You had the option of living with people in a community that was focused on doing something with minimal resources, but with generosity, and put, you probably had to go out and earn a salary so everybody in the house could eat beans and rice and all that good stuff. The other thing we did, which was an incredible invention, was we set aside, I think at least maybe 1 or 2 floors of the Kemper building, where people who wanted to live with simplicity and in community could choose to live in their old age. Incredible. And it didn't cost an arm and a leg. It didn't cost $3,500 a month to live there.
So that's kind of the section on mutual aid in a way, 2 inventions in that
Yeah.
area. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ruth, you were gonna say something.
Well, I know people who I identify as generous-hearted. That's different than being kind. It's different than a lot of other things, but it's a really generous person. I don't experience myself as a generous person. I can do generous deeds. I can think about being generous, but it isn't, there's a difference between welling out from your heart and making it's the difference between the heart and the brain, I think. My brain may be involved in generosity, but I think my heart is not. At least when I compare myself to people that I think of as just the centered core of generosity. And so that's a bit of a struggle, a personal kind of, so what do I do with that? How do I change the nature that I showed up being? It's a little bit like Larry was talking about, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, that's my wrestle, I think, in this chapter of generosity.
He does focus a lot on acts, not on interior states in this. In the chapter before on gratitude, it was a lot about the interior feel of things, but this is
That's
much
true.
more on study the local economy, figure out where the money is going, ask, build relations of mutual aid and so forth and so on.
Mhm.
That's helpful, Jim. Thank you.
I guess I
Well,
was just saying, Ruth, I experienced myself the same way.
Well, the paragraph about Jesus wanted to make sure we count women and children.
Yeah.
I looked at that and I thought, yes. And then at the end of that paragraph, he talks about, I like to think that Andrew, however clumsily and with faltering faith, was trying to move the marginalized to the middle. And I thought, okay, I had this argument with Cyprian de Souza when we were in India. We had come to some place and had driven a car, his car, and we parked. And there was a car walla. In other words, there's a guy who will watch your car to make sure no one vandalizes it. And for that service, you're supposed to pay him paisa. And when this guy came and said, we finished our call and got into the car, he said, paisa. And I said, no, we don't pay people to watch our car. And Cyprian turned to me and said, yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. He said, we have the car. He does not have a car. And then he said, think of it like a parking meter person. He's protecting the car and we're supposed to give him something. And I said, yes, but I don't see that as a service. He said, well, change your mind. He said, change your mind, because this is what supports society.
Yeah.
In India is they do a service for you and you pay them. And I said, okay, how much did we pay them? And I pulled out money. He said, no, that's too much. That's too much. He said, just a few paisa. And I said, okay. And so I paid it. And I thought, okay, that they're providing a service and therefore you're supposed to pay for it. And I was very reluctant. But on the other hand, when Jim was saying that there may be a law that prevents you from renting out the house in back of the house. I have family near Stanford University, and they always rent out the small house behind the big house. And therefore, the students who couldn't go to school and stay someplace that was cheap enough and still support themselves wouldn't be able to go to school.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, that provides a service for the people who can't afford to live in a quote unquote apartment or on campus or whatever. But they always did it, and they never even thought about not doing it.
Mhm.
So, and they of course create a relationship to the people who live
Oh,
in
yeah.
that. So I thought, okay, so how do you create for yourself enough ways to change your mind about something that you become entrenched?
Mm.
Mm.
Patrika Munasinghe in Sri Lanka said that she was supporting a school on the beach because the children were not coming to school. And I said, why weren't they coming to school? She said, there's no food at school. And therefore they're on the verge of starvation. And therefore, in order to get the kids to school, we created a small local organization where all the mothers gathered together the wood and the plants and the water, and we cook food at the school once a day so that the kids will come. And she said, but we need rice and dal. We need something to feed them. And she said, we've been doing this now for 4 months, and all of the organizations that used to provide some money or some food, they're getting to the end of their rope too. And it's getting cold now. And so she said, and that's the only food they're going to eat. So and because it's starting to become winter, there's less vegetation. So she said she doesn't know exactly how else to put it, but there's a need for people who are starving. And unless you have your eyes to see what's going on, it's probably everywhere, not just in Sri Lanka.
Mhm.
And I thought, yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, back to groups. No, just kidding.
What did you think of the Camus quote? Real generosity toward the future lies in giving all to the present.
I thought that was a great quote.
Where was that?
It was just before the ask section. It was at the end of talking about Leslie, the person who did the who lived in Cardington, Ohio, and
Uh-huh.
I was really struck. I'm trying to understand the structure of this.
Yeah.
Those first 2 sections, I made the comment that there's controversy over what the miracle was.
Mm.
And he says, was it natural or supernatural? Is kind of the argument. You know, if it was supernatural, then magically all that food appeared. If it was natural, then people had the food and there it was. But it occurred to me in that next section, more of a miracle. How do I say this? Generosity means stepping into the place that blurs the distinction between natural and supernatural.
Holy
Mm.
Spirit.
When you're really
Well-
asking, you don't know what'll happen. When you really decide to give, you're stepping into,
Yeah,
you're stepping into a different space. And when you're asking people to step into a different space than just either it's miraculous or it's humdrum.
Well, yeah, it's like multiplication and distribution. It's not just one or the other. And you don't have to think about that. You need to move forward where there is the possibility and let it happen.
Yeah, which
I think they pointed out the fact, the difference between the multiplication and distribution was, one was multiplying food and creating something material like food. And
More
the other
food.
was changing one's heart, where those who have are open their hearts to share with others.
Mhm.
You know, it struck me, I don't know if this was our last session. Karen Snyder was talking about the ICAs in Africa, working on a village movement responding to climate change. And she said, and our colleagues in Africa are looking to us in North America and asking us to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Not for money, asking us to change.
yeah.
Our ways, yes.
And she
Yes.
talked, and then she talked about carbon-free uptown and carbon cheerleaders and stuff like that.
Lynn Twist, who is mentioned in here about the author of The Soul of Money.
Mhm.
She was working with a Colombian indigenous community, and the leaders of that community said, what you need to do is go and change the dreams of your people. Because if the dreams of North America and Europe change, the dreams, then everything will change. At that point, that was about 10 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was my reflection when I was leaving the Philippines after living in Longob. You go, and before we
Yeah.
chose Longob, you go to every barangay captain's house and Better Homes and Gardens, pictures of
Yep.
incredible master bedrooms and jacuzzis and swimming pools and yada yada from America. And boy, that got me. Just we're
Mhm.
just proliferating this falsehood of a dream, and that's at the root.
There's a quote somewhere, it goes something like, the old dreams were good dreams. They didn't work out, but they were good dreams.
That's good.
There are two places where I've seen new dreams that this doesn't, maybe it's generosity, I'm not sure. One is Prince William and Kate on they had 15 finalists and they picked 5 of them and one won, but they were all doing things in water, air, the earth thing, really phenomenal kinds of hope-filled things. And the applicants were all diversity from across the globe. And then the CNN just had, I don't remember what they call it, heroes or something. And they had
CNN heroes.
10 that apparently people voted for, and one person got it, but they also had diversity up there, and they were doing very interesting. Some were very highly technical, some were little stoves in Africa. We just need more of that flooding the airways, that stuff is happening out there, as well as changing our dreams.
Mm.
Huh.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Martine just sipped the last of the whiskey in his glass. So I
Does
think
that
it's
mean
time
it's
for
the
us.
end of
No,
class?
there's a little bit left.
Oh, all right. So then we can go back into groups. No.
No.
So you,
So thank you all for participating. Next week is chapter 11, Solidarity. Martine's going to be our guide. Just 3 or 4 or 5, what struck you about this week? What do you want to carry forward, either in terms of this application of open space or generosity? I'd like Marshall to put the link to the New York Times article somewhere.
Okay.
I like the 4 open space criteria, but it felt to me like this group laughed more during this session of generosity than other ones.
Mm.
you must have missed last week.
That's probably
I
true.
thought there was a nice marriage of the metaphor, if you will, of open space and possibility, and this chapter, what was really at the heart of it, with the kind of action and sensitivity you need to have to go into those places of and create a possibility with what's around you.
I just sent the link to the chat. Do you see it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Click on it and see if that gets you anywhere.
It does.
it wants me to subscribe. I'm trying to get off of that.
If you can't read it unless you subscribe.
Yeah, that's what
But you can subscribe for free.
Wait. I'm not sure you were right, Sharon.
Really? Because I can't get in it then.
I can't
You
either.
you can make an account without subscribing. That's what, you have to have an account in order to see New York Times articles, but you don't have to subscribe.
So what I did was I gave it away as a free article so that everybody could read it. Now, I don't know what it's like to receive it, but that's what I thought I did.
Okay.
So this little exercise is like a reprise of the whole chapter.
That's right.
I made the ask. Marshall responded, but it turned out the New York Times was asking us to build the local economy more than just giving things away, or at least giving that possibility to us to do it. And then we find ourselves now as active participants, which is that availability thing, figuring out what we're doing. And now we're trying to work together to build some kind of mutual aid so we can read the damn article.
Well, I just sent it again.
Is
from
it from you or is it from the New Yorker magazine? I didn't get it.
New York Times.
New York Times. And it's asking us to subscribe.
Who's the
Yep.
sender?
They want your money,
Yeah, they want our money.
but I sent it again from the link that I'd copied to give away free articles.
I
Okay.
can see it now.
It's a sample.
Yeah.
They really want your money. And by the way, you can get it at a cheap price.
Oh, listen to this salesman.
Like $1 a week. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
it's 25 cents a week. It's $1 for 4 weeks.
So this is bringing back Evelyn's illustration about being willing to pay the paisa for the fellow watching your car.
That's right. That's right. So
We
I'm
did-
not getting
we
anything.
But
We
if
did
you
this-
can't get it, who can't get it? I'll give you I just pasted it into a Word document.
That- I'm
Anyway.
not seeing the email from,
It's not
Martha.
an email. It's in the chat. It's a
oh, okay.
chat.
In the chat. Oh, okay.
But if it's not working, tell me and I'll send you this Word document.
All right, send us the Word document.
Okay. I'll do
Anyway, I just decided that I was going to be a cheapskate and get the cheap version of the New York Times and read it every day. And at the end of 6 months, they upped my price. So I called them up and wanted to end the subscription, and they gave me the cheap price again. So
Ah,
That's the ask. That's the ask right there.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you all. Thank you
Yeah.
all for
I'm turning into a pumpkin.
I can't live with too many tasks like that to have to do.
Thank you all, and
Thank
we'll
you.
see
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Martine, looking forward to it, Betty.
Okay,
with his,
yeah.
Oh, I read this article. Oh, okay, cool.
Oh,
It was the last one I was allowed to read.
Oh, okay.
Bye, everybody. We're gonna go. in.
Bye-bye.
take care.
Thanks, Marshall.
Yes, we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.